Hi there, my name is Isabel, welcome to my channel. I make sewing tutorials and today we're going to be making this top here that I'm wearing, which is a sample version of a top that I've prepared, and there are many things that I didn't finish in the sample. The hem is not done. I've used two different sorts of white fabric. The medallion here is not it's not to my liking, or wasn't. And as for the sleeves here, I don't know if you can see the opening, it's not the same size. I tried two different openings, so I corrected the pattern, and today I'm going to be sewing what I hope is the final version, and I'm going to take you with me through all the steps. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you what the pattern looks like, because I get actually a lot of questions on how to print it and how to assemble it. When you get the PDF, it's one file adapted to both A4 and US letter format, and when you print, you should get the pattern contained within a rectangle on your page. Then you've got at the same time letters and numbers. So you've got the letters for the lines. All the pages coming on the first line are going to be A's. A4, like this. And then on the second line you've got B's only. And there are no C's here, it's only 8 pages total. Now that you see what it looks like, sorta, I'm going to have to cut off my margins. You can cut off all your margins, but it's a waste of time. I recommend that you only cut off 2 sides, the side on the right and the side on the bottom for every page. Boom, 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 and so on. Now that I've cut a few of the margins, I'm going to be sticking the pages together. Now that I've cut off the margins and stuck all the pages together, I'm going to be cutting my size. So on this pattern here that I have in front of me, there is only the size 36. But the way I make my patterns is I trace dotted lines of different kinds for each size. Find your size among all the dotted lines and cut it. I'm trying to develop currently a collection of patterns made of jersey fabric, which are tops and bottoms that you can buy separately or that you can mix and match. So this top, either you can buy it separately and make a top similar to mine, or you can also assemble it and connect it to a bottom part, like a skirt. Currently I only have a skirt on my shop, and so you're going to be able to make a full dress. So everywhere on the pattern, the seam allowances are included, except at the waist. If you look here on the pattern, you've got notches at the waistline. So if you want to connect this top with the bottom, you'll have to pay attention to the notches that are on the top, and the same notches are also on the bottom, so you just have to put them on top of one another. If you just want to make the top, I recommend that you add 2 things to it. First, some length, and second, of course, your seam allowance. If you just add your seam allowance, it's gonna be fine, but it's gonna make for a very short top. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be adding, let me check, I think I want to add like 3 centimeters in length plus seam allowance. My seam allowance is just going to be 1 centimeter. So we've got here 3 centimeters in length, which means I'm still going to have to add 1 centimeter of paper, and here I'm going to have to add 4 centimeter of paper. So this is the fabric that I have picked for this project. It's a cotton and lycra blend, cotton 95% and lycra 5%. Super common to find out there in just every shop. I don't really like the color actually. I plan to dye it, some sort of Bordeaux, dark red, we'll see. I bought some dye, but I've never done it before, so I'm a bit intimidated, and I might be lazy, I don't know, we'll see. Now I'm gonna move on to cutting my fabric. Okay, so I have finally cut all the pieces of my pattern in the fabric. What people don't tell you when you start sewing is that you're going to spend more time cutting your fabric than actually sewing. But if you can get to like it, I guess you're going to enjoy the whole thing. the pieces of the pattern. So you've got here the straps, the front here twice because the front is double-sided, and then you have the back, and finally you've got the sleeves here. Can you see something? Yeah, the sleeves are there. All right, so we're gonna start with the back. So I've got the back in front of me, and we're gonna prep everything before assembling the different parts together. Make the hems here and here, 1 centimeter of seam allowance. We're gonna fold and stitch 2 centimeters from the edge, and the hem here is 1 centimeter. I'm basting my hems as I often do, which is only a means to trace the lines along which I need to fold my hems. I'm going to pin the hems on the sides and at the bottom, and once it's done, I'll sew using a zigzag stitch. You could also use a twin needle. I'm not doing it because I don't find the elasticity it provides satisfying. And you could probably use a straight stitch, but personally I've never used it because my machine is too old and doesn't offer it. I pull the basting threads, I fold the last hem of the bag, I pin it, and I sew 2 centimeters from the edge. I'm going to be prepping the sleeves now. So here's one sleeve with the hems already basted. I'll start by sewing the 3 hems here with a zigzag, and once these are done, I will fold this hem here and sew 2 centimeters from the edge. And all these parts are going to constitute the channels through which the straps around the neck will go. And as far as the wrist hem is concerned, I'll do it at the very end of the project. Okay, so I've pinned my hems. And by the way, there is 1 centimeter of seam allowance here, only 7 millimeters of seam allowance in the middle, and 1 centimeter again on the right. I sew. Don't hesitate to pull the threads as I'm doing to help your machine grab the fabric. And for the middle hem, the curve is very pronounced, so make some stitches, leave the needle in the fabric, lift the foot, rotate the fabric, bring the foot down, couple stitches, and do this process over and over again until the curve is behind you. This is what you should get. I pin the strap channels. I sew 2 centimeters from the edge. And boom! This is the wrong side of the fabric and the right side. So I'm done with the hems of the sleeves. I mean the hems that are in the upper part, in the shoulder area of the sleeve. Haven't done the wrists yet because I prefer to do this in the end. And now I'm gonna close the sleeve. I'm gonna fold them right sides together and match the notches here on the side. And I'm gonna sew all the way using a zigzag stitch. Okay, the straps now. I'm gonna move to the front. The first thing about the front is to be making the little straps here that are gonna go around the neck. I'm gonna fold my strips like so, right sides together, and I'm gonna sew using a zigzag stitch. I have a safety pin here to turn the straps inside out. Done. All right, the front. I've got my 2 front parts before me. I lay them on top of one another, right sides together. I'm going to sew them respecting 1 centimeter of seam allowance on these 2 edges. I'll sew with a zigzag until maybe 2-3 centimeters from the tip, where I'll switch to a straight stitch. Here around the medallion, I'm going to respect 7 millimeters of seam allowance, and I'll sew with a straight stitch. On the other side, it's the same. I'll start with a zigzag stitch, and when I'm about 3 centimeters away from the end, I'll switch to a straight stitch. So let's do it. A zigzag. Now I switch. I move my fabric a bit so that the straight stitch is at the same level as the zigzag one, and I sew. And now I'm doing the medallion, and here I just use my foot's width as guide to respect the 7 millimeter seam allowance, since my foot is 7 millimeter wide. I manage the curve by leaving my needle in the fabric. I lift the foot, I rotate my fabric, just as I did before for the sleeve, and so on. Now I'm gonna add the straps. So here's how the neckline looks like right now. I now take my straps and I'm going to insert them in between the 2 layers of the top. I pin in place, same for the other one, and I sew 1 centimeter from the edge, and you don't want to sew in the seam allowance as we will cut them off in a bit. Like this. I trim the seam allowances. I cut some notches in the fabric in the medallion seam allowance. Let's turn it inside out and check what we have. All right. I am now going to connect the back and the front. So I turned the front inside out again so the right sides are touching and the wrong side is facing up. I'm going to attach my back to my front. I will insert it in between the two front layers. It doesn't matter whether your back is facing up or down since the front is double-sided. I match the armpits and I pin using the notches as guide, like so. Now I'm going to sew the back to one of the front layers on the right side on just about 3 centimeters. You'll understand why in a bit. Once it's done, I add the other front layer and I pin all 3 layers together. On one side, I sew from top to bottom with a zigzag, and on the other side, I do a first seam until the seam I did earlier, and the second one after that seam. So this means that we're going to leave an opening, which is going to be used to turn the top inside out later. I only show you how I sew the right side with the opening. I stop the seam once they overlap, and I finish sewing this bottom bit. Alright, the sides are done. Now I'm going to sew the bottom seam. For this purpose, I'll pin the back away from the edges so as to make sure that I don't sew over it by mistake. You want to stick your pins on the right side of the fabric of the back. You don't want the pins to be trapped in between the layers of the fabric, right? Now I'll pin the 2 front layers together. I want to start my seam here with the straight stitch really close to the end of my back. This is my back layer that you can see here in between, but don't sew on it, right? In order to keep that layer inside and make sure I don't sew over it, I'm going to trim the seam allowances a bit. And I sew. Alrighty, time to turn the top inside out. Oops, okay, let me trim the corners first. Okay, so this is the wrong side with the opening here. I'm not showing you, but I'm going to hand stitch it right now. And this is the front, done! And that connection is so clean. Alright, time to connect the sleeves. I got my sleeves next to my top. All parts are right sides facing up. To know what's the front or back of the sleeve, you compare these parts here of the shoulders. The back part is wider than the front one. What I'm going to do now is attach the sleeve in this area to the top in this area. So let me take my ruler quickly. I'm measuring 2 centimeters after the side seam and 2 centimeters before, and I pin. And now I'll bring the sleeve and the top edges to edges or edge to edge. The side seam must be in front of the sleeve seam. What I'm going to do is sew the parts against one another, but without overlap. And I'll sew them like that using a zigzag stitch. I'm actually not so proud of the way I arranged connecting the sleeves to the bodice. It's not an elegant construction process, contrary to the way I connected the front and the back, in my opinion. Also, since I'm using a darker thread, it's gonna look messy, but when I tested it on my white version with white thread, I realized it's not showing, so it's not too bad, and also because it's hidden in the armpit, it's actually fairly discreet. So here's me in my zigzag, and I'm gonna do multiple back and forth to secure the connection. That's it. My sleeves are now connected to the bodice. Finally, I'm going to close the straps. I take that safety pin again and I run the straps through the shoulder and back channels. In the back, I'm going to connect the 2 ends of the strap with the safety pin. Then I'll try the top, see if I like the tension, and I'll move the safety pin and try the top until I like it. Okay, let's try. Warning, it is pouring outside. You're going to be able to hear the rain. I can see myself in the mirror right there, and I think it's pretty good. I think I could add 1 centimeter here because there is some fold happening. So I could, you know, just add 1 centimeter. So that's going to be 3 centimeters in the front and 2 in the back. And then here, it's a bit difform, which I think the reason is that there's too much tension. So there you go. The pieces should unite here. They should cross just above the tip of the front. So I'm gonna loosen a bit the tension at the ends of the strap. And then what I can do as well is hand stitch those two parts so they really fall on top of one another, and this thing keeps its shape all the time. And if you fancy it, you can also just hand stitch this part and this part in place so that it's symmetrical in the end. So I'll correct the strap tension by not overlapping the ends as much, and this is the way it looks once I've sewed the ends together. It's not so clean, but it doesn't matter because it's going to be hidden in the back. Finally, the sleeve hems. I'm sewing the hems at the wrists, and that's it. The top is done. This is the voiceover telling you goodbye. Kiss. Alright, this is the end of this video. The top turned out okay, so I'm pretty happy with it. If you liked it, please click the like button, and if you want to be in the know of my upcoming tutorials and patterns, then subscribe and follow me on Instagram. I hope you have a nice rest of the day, and I'll see you soon for another video. Kiss, bye.